Okay, we're live now.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. If you're just tuning in, we'll be starting today's halaqah in about 3 minutes, so bang on 8:30, inshallah. So stay with us.
My audio is okay, is it?
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. That artwork in the back, is that something that you've done, Zubnisa?
No. This is actually, I'm sure it's in quite a lot of families in England and in the households. It's a picture from the range, and there's a trend where you write the 99 names of Allah on one in each section.
Okay.
So I bought this to do that, but let's see when I get around to doing that.
Inshallah, make it make it one of your resolutions for Ramadan.
Inshallah.
3 a day.
Oh yeah. Otherwise, it's just a pending job to do. So that's a good idea.
I think someone's fire alarm is low on battery.
Oh my goodness, that's mine. We've got so used to it, we don't notice it. Can't do anything about that right now.
Well, at least your audio is, definitely working properly. We can hear the alarm. We can hear the alarm.
Yeah. Oh dear.
Okay. All right. Let's make a start, inshallah. Okay. Assalamu alaikum, everyone, and welcome to this evening's Friday halaqah. We're going to be doing a special workshop today on dealing with anxiety and depression. So my name is Junaid. I'm going to be your host alongside Sister Zebunessa, who's going to be co-hosting with me. So to deliver some expertise on today's topic, we're quite privileged to be joined by Dr. Naveed Sayed. So I'll give a little bit of an intro to Dr. Naveed. He studied medicine at Manchester University. He got a postgrad diploma in medical education. He has a master's in public health, and he specializes in infectious diseases. Previously, he was an advisor to the British High Commission Pakistan, and currently he's a consultant in communicable disease control for Public Health England. Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Naveed. Thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Welcome to Rahmatullah. Thank you for that. It's a privilege to be here. Thanks.
So to kick us off, Sister Zebunessa is going to give us a very brief introduction to today's topic.
Thank you. So the topic of today links depression, anxiety, and Islam. So generally, at some point in our lives, we all experience sadness, fear, anguish, apprehension, or unease. And these are completely normal responses to unpleasant or stressful events. And with time, they become less intense and disappear. But if these feelings persist, they may result in depression or an anxiety disorder. These are just two of many mental health concerns that exist and can cause a serious impact in day-to-day life. Now, you might ask, what is the big deal about mental health issues and why are they talked about so often? Let me share some statistics from a survey by the mental health charity Mind. 1 in 4 people experience a mental health problem of some kind each year in England. 1 in 5 people have suicidal thoughts, and this number is up by 30% between the years of 2000 and 2014. 1 in 14 people self-harm, and this number has increased by 62% in the years mentioned. 1 in 15 people attempt suicide, each year. Only 1 in 8 adults with mental health problems are currently having treatment. Real figures are higher, of course. This is for those who have reported issues, and many do not. There are more disturbing figures to follow. NHS digital data shows that 1 in 9 children aged 5 to 15 had a mental health disorder in 2017. 41% of admissions to hospital for self-harm were for teenagers. 7% of 17-year-olds have attempted suicide. And after extrapolation to the UK population, this seemingly low number comes out to be 52,427 of 17-year-olds. 24% said that they have self-harmed, which comes out to 170,744 of 17-year-olds. And the figure for children aged 14 was 16%. Mental health concerns are often not taken seriously, and this varies amongst communities of different ethnic backgrounds. Surveys and data have shown a clear difference between figures for white and British Asian ethnic minority groups, BAME groups. Asian groups have a consistently lower referral rate to seek mental health treatment than their white counterparts, although in some areas, BAME groups have a 21% higher proportion of admission to hospital. So circles of fear can stop people from engaging, especially when the first point of contact might be in crisis, either through A&E or other coercive methods. Possible reasons for these variations, according to Mind, include different cultural and practical barriers to accessing care, a mental health stigma in some communities, or differences in how people are treated, including experiences of racism. Families delay seeking help due to the historical taboo that persists on this issue. Each person suffering feels alone. 1 in 4 of the population is a lot of people suffering alone. So the big deal is that this is a problem affecting generations before us and will affect those after us, unless we do our part to bring awareness. The above data, by the way, was collated before the COVID-19 pandemic, and it isn't hard to imagine how much more the lockdown and pandemic would have affected people since. Brother Junaid.
Sister. I mean, look, those are disturbing figures to say the least. Just listening to all those numbers and people feeling alone, people with suicidal thoughts and so on. This is a real issue. This is affecting us today in our communities, in our homes, our families, and it has a big impact on the Muslim community as well. So it's something that we can't hide from and something that we need to address, which is why we're hosting tonight's special session. And we hope it can be of some benefit to everyone watching. So very briefly, I'm going to just cover the format of today's show. So we're going to get Dr. Naveed to deliver a short talk, maybe about 10-15 minutes on the topic. And then that's going to be followed by a live questions and answers session. So if you want to submit your questions to the show, you can do so with the following methods. So we should get something up on the screen for you now. Yeah. So to submit your questions, if you're watching on YouTube, you can sign into YouTube and use the chat function. Just comment your questions on the page there, and then we'll pick them up from there. You can also send a text message or a WhatsApp message to the phone number on the screen there. Or if you're in any of our Hounslow Muslim Center or Halaqah WhatsApp groups, these are now open at the moment, and you can submit questions there as well, and we will pick them up from those points as well. So that we'll show this again later on before we get into the Q&A. But if you think of any questions during Dr. Naveed's talk, just submit them at any time, and then we'll pick them all up at the end. So without further ado, we'll go over to Dr. Naveed.
Jazakallah khair. Thank you very much for that, both of you, and thank you for inviting me to talk about this really important topic. So, Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim, and I think you've outlined why it's so important. The fact that we have such, people would use the word an epidemic of mental illness, and it is quite important that we recognize that. We try to address it, and as you mentioned in those statistics in the introduction, we do what we can to destigmatize it and to normalize a discussion around mental health. We're happy to talk about people who are suffering from cancer. We're happy to talk about people who are suffering from diabetes. Maybe we weren't many years ago, but now where the stigma associated with those illnesses has reduced, but we still find a stigma associated with mental health and mental illness. So we do need to have this really important conversation, and you really outlined quite in graphic statistical detail why it's important and why it's necessary for us to discuss this, and this is part of breaking down those barriers. And just to sort of briefly outline, I don't want to sort of spend too much detail in getting too technical, and hopefully we can sort of explore things, but the key points that I wanted to make to get across and wanted our sort of audience to go home with and to think about and to contemplate and to wonder how to engage with is essentially, as you've mentioned in the introduction, mental health, mental well-being and mental illness, they are real issues, and we shouldn't sweep them under the carpet. We shouldn't ignore them. They are real, and we need to address them, and we need to acknowledge them. And of the mental illnesses that you mentioned, the more common ones that we can relate to, I suppose, is depression and anxiety, and sort of which some would consider on a spectrum of mental illness. By all means, there's a lot more in terms of mental ill health, but we might just sort of focus on depression and anxiety more so today, and then if as I say, if there's a need, we can explore other things later on. But essentially, it's real, and we need to acknowledge that. And that there are therapies for it. There are treatments, and people do get treated and people do improve. And so we need to acknowledge that, and there shouldn't be any shame or any reticence about seeking treatment and seeking support. And obviously there is a stigma associated with it, and we can explore the reasons behind that, inshallah, in the Q&A. But essentially, it's important. Also, from a Western perspective, let's say, there are treatments and therapies, and broadly speaking, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that we can access online, and you mentioned Mind as a fantastic resource, and I would certainly recommend Mind as a really good starting point for many in the audience. I mean, there are other things, other types of therapies that are proven to work, and it's not just about drugs and medications. And yes, we do have those things, but we reserve them for when they are necessary. And the other supportive ways in which we can support people with mental health issues are through talking therapies, diet, better diet, more exercise. There are lots of apps that can support people through that. So not just sort of mindfulness apps, but other ways in which we can sort of promote our own self-care. There's other things like sort of paradoxically reducing screen time. I know it seems a bit odd because we're in that forum, you know, and breathing techniques, sort of meditation type approaches, counseling, as I say, looking after yourself. All of these things, they do work, and they do help people deal with depression, anxiety, mental health issues, and improve through that journey. So that's really key. Also, there are obviously issues we have to acknowledge around caring for people with mental illness. And you talked about that the diagnosis is increasing, and yet there is a lot of unmet need. There's a lot of people who aren't diagnosed, who aren't on a pathway for support and care. So we need to acknowledge that. And there may be structural reasons from the health service, and there may be issues within the community and culture that are providing barriers for those people getting the treatment and support that they need. So we need to acknowledge that, and that's really critical and important. But not just looking at it from a sort of a Western paradigm. I think what I would like to do, and certainly what I was asked to sort of explore, which may come out in the discussion, is as a Muslim community and society, we've had a long and close relationship with people who are vulnerable and have had mental health issues. And generally speaking, historically, Muslims have had a very positive attitude towards people with mental illness. I mean, so much so that when they started sort of setting up their asylums here in the European countries, Bedlam, places like that, where people would pay to see mad people, the same sort of physicians and people who used to go to the Eastern countries and to Muslim countries would see that actually, as a society, the Muslims really protected and supported people with mental illness. So much so that, people, I mean, there are lots of diaries of people, coming back and saying, look, that they almost, treat people with mental illness like royalty. So there's a lot of support mechanism that historically Muslim societies have put around people who are vulnerable in those situations. The Quran refers to mental health as well, and we need to acknowledge that, and we need to sort of reread those passages that refer to those things. But the general thrust in the Quran is one of encouraging us Muslims to be positive and having a positive attitude. It's not about dwelling and ruminating and sort of having a negative, nihilistic attitude. It's about being positive and putting our trust in Allah. And in fact, you could argue that it's a fundamental aspect of who we are as Muslims. It's part of our Aqidah, our sort of 6 sort of articles of faith, not the 5 pillars, not the actions, but our beliefs, belief in the oneness of Allah, the angels, the books, the prophets, the day of judgment, and al-qada wal-qadar, or fate and destiny. And part of that belief is, whatever, you can't escape what has been written for you. So it's how we deal with those things which are outside our sphere of influence, how we interact with those things, and how we reconcile the reality. So it's part of who we are. It's our fabric as Muslims, and we need to have that conversation. And Islam, it talks a lot about structures to support people who are going through these difficult times. And there's things that we can do, which I'm happy to explore on an individual level. And it's, things like, increasing your dhikr, but also there's the twin track approach of having sabr in your situation, patience, fortitude, and also having gratitude for your situation as well, and shukr. And these concepts are really critical. And again, I'm happy to explore them in more detail, but these help the individuals build resilience within themselves, and it helps us better cope with the situation. Islam also provides a framework for society to support people in their rules and regulations, and in encouraging congregational and societal approaches to interacting with people, and making an obligation, for us to sort of, meet people in society and support people. It's not just about congregational prayer or zakah, but it's about maintaining family relationships. It's about not boycotting. It's about the obligations to your neighbor, to other people in the community, and bereavement support. And these things are essentially legislated that that we need to do at a community level. And then there's the preventative aspect of mental health and well-being that is sort of, as I said, it's quite pervasive within Islam if we look carefully. So, for example, all our actions need to have evidence from Quran and Sunnah, and so we need to reference things. And there is this aspect of accountability and personal culpability, and that helps people with recognizing their own coping and resilience mechanisms, and developing a sense of trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and recognizing the good and the bad from Allah. Having that sense of tawakkul Allah is key in building that Islamic personality, and all of these things will help individuals be more resilient and to cope with the stresses that we're bound to get in life. I mean, Allah will test us, and He tests us regularly. He tests us, these are major tests. We will face life events, and it's not just your major life events, your marriage, your moving house, the death of a loved one, but other things in terms of your interpersonal relationships, your jobs, your finances, and your houses, housing situations. All of these things, it's part of life, and we need to acknowledge that and know how we can get support from each other and from Islam to get through that. So these are some of the sort of ideas that I'm happy to explore, but the key things are that it's really important we start this conversation, and we're not shy about talking about it. And if people know people who are suffering, or they themselves feel that they might be on that sort of spectrum or that journey where they need help, I'm hoping that the conversation today will allow them, give them permission, or help them take those steps towards that. And as I say, we can sort of talk more specifically about things like depression or anxiety, and how we can support that, as well as some of the sort of societal or Islamic perspectives around that. So that's where I just wanted to sort of start off, sort of my starter for 10 really, and then sort of over to yourself.
Thank you, Dr. Naveed. They were very interesting topics. I particularly found it quite moving when you described that in the history of Muslim experience, people suffering from mental health issues were treated like royalty, and that is, it's I think it's in the fitrah as well to protect those who are weak, and you find that in the animal kingdom as well. So it is, I didn't know about that. That's very interesting.
Jazakallah khair, Dr. Naveed. Just to support that, it's amazing how you were talking about Islam already having so many established, routes of support and methods set up to help people that are going through this struggle, and we have the Quranic support on that as well. So for me, it just further cements how our religion and our deen is, it's an all-encompassing way of life, isn't it?
Absolutely, completely agree. And for us, that's a very reassuring thing. And what a lot of Muslims fail to appreciate is because Allah has made our life, our purpose in life so crystal clear. We have that sort of moral compass, essentially. We know what life is about. When you're in when you're brought up in a different society or different cultural values, where you don't have that certainty about your purpose in life, that adds to people's anxieties. That makes things sort of more difficult, and it often compounds their anxieties. And so again, by Allah explaining our purpose in life and saying other things like your rizq is fixed, your ajal is fixed, you know, for us it takes not the worry away from those things, but it helps us put things in perspective. And by Allah mentioning those things, which are really critical and key in terms of the wealth you're going to earn and how long you're going to be on this earth, that, you know, don't fret about those. What's going to get to you will get you, and when what's meant to miss you will miss you. And that's the aspect of al-qada wal-qadar. And having that you know, certainty in those fixed aspects. Obviously, we need to strive to achieve them, and there is the uncertainty around how it's going to happen, but we're not stressing about it. And so, you know, Allah's been so generous in His blessings to us. We just need to recognize those things, and that's part of being resilient and having a much healthier relationship with Allah, therefore with ourselves.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, just again, you mentioned the point about risk. I mean, this is something that is unique to our deen. You know, the simple concept that every pound that you're going to earn in your life is already written for you. It's written for you. So why stress about it? You know, it's already been decided for you, and Allah is the best of providers.
And again, another point to do with that is how it's clearly said in the Quran that you never should say, if only, you know, if only I had done this. You know, you make mistakes, things happen, calamities might happen, but just move forward and don't think negatively that if, and I think that's quite the basis of a lot of counseling theories as well, that you don't look back, you look forward. So,
absolutely.
Well balanced.
So, Jazakallah khair again, Dr. Naveed. So we're going to make our way into the question and answer session of this evening's halaqah. So I can see a couple of questions are filtering through. So we're going to give the viewers a couple more minutes to submit their questions now. And again, on the screen, just a reminder for everyone, you can submit your questions on the YouTube live video. You can send a message, a text message or a WhatsApp message to the phone number on the screen now. Or if you're in any of our Hounslow Muslim Center or Halaqah WhatsApp groups, these are currently opened up, so you can submit questions on those channels as well. So while you're thinking of your questions, I'm just going to talk a little bit about the groups that have made this Halaqah possible this evening. So this was it's a joint venture between Faith Inspire and Hounslow Muslim Center. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Faith Inspire. Faith Inspire is a voluntary Muslim organization that engages in community outreach, promotes spiritual growth, and actively works for social change. Some of the objectives of Faith Inspire are to promote a balanced understanding of Islam, develop volunteers and leaders, provide social hubs for families, develop institutions and services that can advance mutual understanding and dialogue, and finally, work for the common good and contribute positively to society. So if you would like to find out more about Faith Inspire, or maybe you're interested in volunteering and getting involved in some of the work that we do, then please visit faithinspire.org.uk. This sister's going to talk a bit about Hounslow Muslim Center.
Yes, absolutely. So Hounslow Muslim Center is based in the town centre, the heart of Hounslow. It's a new masjid. The aim of the centre is to establish itself as a service-packed community hub for people of all ages, the elderly, the young, everyone in between. We have prayer services for men, women, and children. And there are many projects running, like the youth club. A new project is Community Companions, which is a scheme intended to support the elderly and vulnerable in our community. Volunteers will be engaged in telephone befriending, collecting groceries and medicine where needed. We're aiming to start a food bank. We're here to do any guidance and support, benefit checks, signposting if we can't fulfill the requirement, then we can send you to those who can. And today's discussion was the first of many workshops and webinars to come for this project. If you'd like to volunteer or to help us, or if you know of anyone who could benefit from this scheme, even if it's a family member, please do contact us, and you can find the details on our website, hounslow.com. So let's begin with our first question, Dr. Naveed. So there, I think we've covered that the myth that Muslims do not suffer from mental illnesses, but there is an idea that going to therapy negates trust in Allah. So what is there in Islam to support seeking help for these issues?
I mean, that's a really good question, and it's probably quite fundamental. So I'm really pleased whoever submitted that has asked that, and the starting premise is correct in as far as, you know, mental health, mental illness does affect, you know, people in the Muslim community. It affects everyone in the BAME community. We're not immune. Just religion or a firm belief in religion has some protective value against some mental illnesses. So there's a lot of research around that, but it's not a panacea in of itself. And we have to recognize that we are living in a different paradigm. We're living in a Western paradigm. We're living in a society that is at the moment, very atomized. It's the values that are being sort of promoted throughout society and accepted, and the normative values, some of them go against Islam. You know, so there's a lot of focus on individualism, on materialism, on consumerism, liberalism, in you know, sort of in individual freedom, and these things are almost an antithesis to the communal approach that Islam recommends. And so you do get this sort of dissonance within an individual when you have these different tensions. And so absolutely, mental health issues are a problem in our community, and they affect all. I mean, from youngsters, we're seeing young people with mental illnesses, and you mentioned some of the statistics at the beginning, you know, through to people in the working age, where you get up sort of a higher suicide rate, to people sort of in the older age groups in isolation and loneliness. So that they're all there. When we are, as I mentioned before, when we're suffering from a cancer or a growth or diabetes or high blood pressure, we seek medical help and support. And so when things aren't quite right in terms of our mental health, we should also seek help and support. So there should be no stigma associated with that. The benefits we have as a Muslim is that we are, I mean, it sounds paradoxical, but actually it's one of the beauties of Islam, in as far as we are encouraged to seek support from experts. So if you are ill, the Prophet says there is you know, a benefit, there's sunnah, you get a reward for going to the doctor to try and get that sorted out, because your body is a trust and you need to look after it. Likewise, there's also evidence from the Seerah, the life of the Prophet, where the Prophet said, if you have tawakkulullah in certain situations, that can also be beneficial to you. So so we just need to be careful that we don't just say, just put your complete trust in Allah and, you know, forget seeking help, because you may be doing yourself a disservice. So that the better outcome is certainly to tie your camel and then put your trust in Allah. And much like if you have a problem, any other problem in life, you will go to the experts to get it sorted. So we are absolutely encouraged, in fact recommended, to seek help and support for any problems that we have, physical and mental. but there's no acknowledgement of sort of weakness in that. We're not saying it's not a macho culture where we're forcing people to if they perceive they've got problems coping, that's seen as a sign of weakness. That's the thing that we need to break, and we need to highlight to people that going, the rough and the smooth is part of life. And if we look at the life of the Prophet ﷺ, I mean, he had a really, really tough time. So I mean, he was an orphan, and then a double orphan. When he started his dawah, he was outcast. He was in fact boycotted by his family, his own tribe, his own social network. There was, he suffered torture, persecution, name calling. He was exiled, and he was living in existential threat, for his life. I mean, he was chased out of Taif just for doing dawah. And he suffered other traumas. He buried his own children, and even in war fighting, he was injured. And there's a whole period in his life which we refer to as Am al-Huzn, right? It's the year of sorrow. It's the year of sadness. And the scholars of Sirah have specifically called it that, because obviously they saw a change in the Prophet ﷺ from his dawah, then when he lost his beloved wife and his uncle in a very short space of time. He was grief-stricken, and there's nothing wrong with that. And the Sahabi would try to cheer him up, and they suggested things that he could do. But it's part and parcel of life. He, when his son Ibrahim passed away, he was crying. And then again, there's the same attitude amongst some of the people in the Ummah. They came to Rasulullah and they said, "Look, you're crying. Why are you crying? You told us to have patience and sabr." So they're trying to work out why is the Prophet crying, and he said, "Look, I'm only human, right? I've lost my son. The eyes cry, the heart pains, right? But I will not say that which would displease Allah." And again, if and that's a really critical aspect of how we manage these really traumatic issues. And again, we've got other examples in the Quran, like Musa. I mean, he's chased out of Egypt, fearing his life, and he goes to Madian, and he's exhausted. His slippers and sandals are torn to shreds, right? And he's sort of run out of everything. And then he sits under the tree and he makes that famous dua, "Oh Allah, I am in desperate need for any help that you can send me." And this is Musa alayhi salam, right? And so, and even, I mean, you have Yaqub alayhi salam, the son, Yaqub alayhi salam. So his beloved son, Yusuf, was taken from him, and he was grieving so much he went blind through that grief. So we recognize this as part of life. We're not shying away from it. We're acknowledging it, and Islam gives us the mechanisms to deal with those issues. And some of the, I mean, we can explore it if there are other questions, but some of the ways in which Islam encourages us to deal with those and develop these coping and resilient skills are I mean, we talked about some of the concepts.
Sorry about that. Sorry to interrupt. We've actually got quite a lot of questions waiting. You've got up to about 15 questions that people have submitted.
That's fantastic.
So I think some of the topics that you're about to talk about will probably be covered in some of these questions, and I'm just conscious that we want to get through as many of these as possible. So let's try and get through as many of these questions as possible. It's a very thought-provoking topic, and a lot of people have things that they want to ask. So
it's dear to people. We need to recognize that, and it's important that we give people the space to explore these and to be comfortable with that conversation. So completely welcome that.
Absolutely. So the first question that I've seen come up here is this might be maybe a slight misunderstanding. If you need clarity, do let us know. Is mental health considered bad in Islam?
Mental illness is not considered bad in of itself. The Prophet ﷺ said that the pen is lifted from 3. Okay, so basically saying that there's a recognition that there are people who have mental illness, and you are not culpable. You have no personal responsibility if you are a child, if you are sleeping, and if you are majnoon, if you are mad, as it were. And so this is a key aspect that of Islam, of the Sharia, that the scholars have written extensively about. Well, what makes you a child? What's the transition between childhood and adulthood, where you become responsible for your actions? What's the definition of being in sleep, and therefore not having a conscious awareness of doing your actions, which is the same principle as people who have mental illness. And so the pen is lifted from these people. And so that's why I said Muslim societies, they legislated for this, and they created an environment to support these people, because this is core to how we look after people. And it goes back to the core aspect of Islam, of our Aqidah and the Day of Judgment, is personal responsibility. So there's a recognition that there is mental illness and mental health problems. And the Prophet ﷺ talked about people who have significant illnesses. If they are patient with that, that can be their passport to Jannah. So there's a lot in there, but certainly it's I wouldn't say it's a reality, and there's nothing in Islam which contradicts the reality. And so there's a recognition that these are issues, and that as individuals, as experts, and as communities, and as families, we need to support each other through that.
Yeah, so we definitely we wouldn't say mental health is considered bad in our deen. So Jazakallah khair. So I hope that answers whoever asked that question. But if that's not what you were looking for, feel free to submit something more detailed, and inshallah.
If we just go back to what I mentioned a couple of minutes ago, with the Prophet ﷺ, he was obviously patently visible to everyone that he was sad for a prolonged period of time, and no one accused him of being in the wrong place in that way. It's a recognition that he's gone through some emotional trauma, and then they're trying to support him through that.
Yeah, absolutely. Jazakallah khair. So I'll ask the next question as well, and just a comment for our viewers. Some of these questions are quite heavy, quite loaded, and probably topics within themselves that we could discuss. So I'm going to ask Dr. Naveed to just limit his answers to about 2-3 minutes maximum, only so that we can answer as many of your questions as possible, because there's a whole range of topics being asked here. So the next question is, could you comment on any relationship between mental health and jinn possession?
Right. Okay. I mean,
that's a challenge in 2-3 minutes, isn't it?
Well, it is, and I have a very reductionist approach to that, and it's not something that people from our community appreciate that much, because there's a lot of stories around jinn possession. Essentially, if you've got mental illness, you go to the mental health specialists, and they will deal with that. And this concept of exorcism and that sort of stuff, I firmly believe is not from authentic traditions that we have. And for example, as I say, my personal view on this is that Islam is complete, and there's nothing that's been left out of that. You know, we find in the books of hadith, we find in the books of jurisprudence, the book on salah, the book on nikah, the book on talaq, the book on zakah. We don't find the book on jinn. Right? You won't find any classical, authentic scholar that's done a treatise on jinn possession, and so I don't think that type of interaction is really feasible. The jinn are able to whisper, to do the waswasa, and that is the permission that they've been given. But the issues of possession, I'm not a firm believer of that at all. And if you look in the early generations of the Sahabi and the Tabi'in and the Tabi'in and the other generations that followed, whenever something happened in society, never once did they say, well, so-and-so could have done this, or maybe the jinn did it, or the jinn made me do it. That paradigm was just not there. And so I believe that this thinking came in much later. But if you look at the early generations, they would, if there was a robbery or a murder, they didn't say, well, it could have been so-and-so, or it could have been the jinn, or something like that. So in short, if you've got demonstrable mental health issues, go seek help from a GP, or from mental health specialists and from counselors and people who know what they're talking about. Do not go to people who will offer quick fixes in the community like that, who don't have the training and skills to deal with these complex issues.
There's a question here which kind of bridges over to the medical side. Sometimes my anxiety is so high, I get tension headaches. How can one fix this?
Okay, and that's a really good question. Obviously there's no one answer to that. You have to try different things that work for yourself, and always any of these medical questions that people are asking, my automatic and first response will be, and I will say this here, and I'll keep repeating if other people ask these questions, is go to a trained counselor or your own GP and get proper professional advice from them. I don't know you. I can give you general ways in which we can deal with these things. So don't take on what I'm saying as personal instruction. You need to go to the specialists who know you and who can tailor their response. But just for the wider audience, in terms of what anxiety is, because as I say, it's an oft used term, and it's just essentially it's about sort of being sort of worried and tense at a sort of a more sort of higher degree level. I heard someone explain it really nicely to me, and that stuck with me. It's like when you're rocking on a chair, and we've all done that. You're rocking on a chair, excuse me, and you're not going to go dizzy. And then you get to that critical sort of point of equilibrium where you're perfectly balanced. And then suddenly you jerk back. And then that instant where you jerk back, you feel as if your heart is jumping out. Have you had that sense? Right? So that split second, that feeling of your heart jumping out, a lot of people describe sort of anxiety as having a more chronic state of that. Normally, so that you flip back and your heart goes back. But for people who feel anxious, that they have a prolonged sense of that sort of heightened sort of heart jumping out, and you know, it could be related to the sort of the flight, fright, sort of freeze response that the body has. But it's feeling that things are your fears are out of proportion to what they are, and you're starting to avoid doing things in a particular situation. People who have anxiety may have symptoms like sort of stomach churning, sweating, difficulty sleeping, feeling lightheaded or dizzy, headaches, backaches, muscle pains. These types of things, grinding your teeth at nighttime, or feeling sick, or an altered bowel habit. So all of these things are symptoms of anxiety, and often they are sort of more persistent. So in terms of dealing with those types of symptoms, I mean, there are things that you can do for yourself that work for people. And again, going to professionals, or even some of these, you mentioned right at the beginning, Zevanisa, Mind. I mean, that's an excellent online resource, and it'll go through ways in which you can look at your support yourself through that journey. And so, some of the things are talking therapies. I mean, find a friend or find someone you can talk to about your anxieties. Think about how you can manage those worries. That will sometimes help if you think about it and contemplate about it. Make a diary, perhaps, what's preceding these feelings, and then start to analyze those things. For some people, better diet, or doing exercise, or going for longer walks, that helps. Other people find breathing exercises help. And again, if you want to get rewarded for it, if you do it for the right intention, I've heard other Muslim psychologists say that take a deep breath in, and you do some zikr with that, or you could say something like Allah as you're breathing in, and Allah as you're breathing out, and then just help sort of calm yourself down. Peer support, talk to other people that might be in that similar situation, get some tips on how to do that, and then meditation or other things. So try these things first before perhaps going to some of the more sort of intrusive interventions that your own doctor or your counseling services may recommend. But do bear in mind, you may need to go for sort of talking therapies, counseling therapies, sort of applied relaxation, and or medication. So and I do appreciate this is sort of a longer answer, but I think it's important just to mention that, because there may be a lot of other people who are thinking the same thing. But finally, just on that, so there's things that the individual can do, that there's support that they can have. But for the rest of us, who the family and friends, we can also support. So we can recognize when people are in that situation. It's our obligation not to put pressure on them, and support them through their panic attacks or their anxiety issues, and try to understand and be empathetic to people in that situation. And or we recognize that it's affecting their daily life. So let's encourage them to seek help and support, and help them take the first step. So there's lots we can do to that, and thank you for asking that question, and I hope that there's something there that you can take forward.
Dr. Naveed, I think probably it was a longer answer, but it's a very important question, and there's a lot of good information there. Of course, a reminder of the first point: there is support out there in the NHS, and get in touch with your GP as a good first point to get the personalized specialist care that you may require. So the next question, we've probably got about 10 minutes or so of our scheduled time, and probably about that many questions to answer as well. So we're going to keep plowing through and get through as many of them as possible. The next question is, what lessons from the Sunnah are there that we can apply to this discussion? Are there examples of companions who suffered from such illnesses?
Yes. I mean, yes, there are, again, it was a different society there, and they had a different way of looking at things. But some of the things that I would say in terms of the attitude that the early Muslims have, that we can try to implement on ourselves for dealing with these things. And I mean, we talked about the idea that al-qadar wal-qadar, your fate and destiny, whatever's going to get you will get you, whatever's going to miss you will miss you. But there are a couple of other really key things that I would like to say, just in terms of, we need to recognize that Allah does not burden us more than that which we can bear. And that is a definite. He's mentioned it in the Quran. So whatever tests are put in front of us, he knows, and we know that that is something that we can get through. And so we should never be in a state of hopelessness. And also, the Sahabi did this, and they lived by this mantra, and it's mentioned in the Quran, so it's definite, it's true. Verily, with the remembrance of Allah will the hearts find ease and tranquility. And so it's about incorporating those techniques and remembering Allah. And we're not sure of the mechanism of that, but it works, much like reading the Quran. Just reading the Quran without a translation, the reading in of itself will help us through these difficult times. It's true, it works, and these things help with the resilience. This is how the early generations and the Sahabi who were suffering these traumas would get through those difficult times. And finally, to recognize the other promise of Allah is that verily with hardship comes ease. So yes, it's tough, and sometimes you don't think that there's a way out, but then without tawakkul Allah, Allah will provide us for a way out that we did not recognize or appreciate or think was coming, but it's there. And verily with hardship comes ease, and we need to really firmly embed that thinking.
I'll ask the next two, because they're kind of linked, and it's something you've already touched on actually. So we'll just quickly go through them. Do jinns have anything to do with mental health? And what is ADHD? Is it jinn possession? And do we need to do ruqya? So I think I'll recap your previous point, that where you think you have a mental health problem, you need to get in touch with your GP and get that specialist care as a first point of call. Did you want to add anything to that, Dr. Naveed?
No, I mean that's right. I mean, we shouldn't, as I said, the early generations, they didn't project mental illness onto these other beings. We know jinn exist. We know they live in a parallel dimension. They do waswasa, but that's it. And so we need to take ownership of our own problems and find a solution that works through sort of real world interventions, right? And that is, when I say real world interventions, I mean not just going to your doctor, but doing these things, reading the Quran, praying to Allah, making dua, believing in the support of Allah. That is real world, and not the superstitious stuff that some people say.
Thank you. The next question is, how can we benefit from Western psychological practices to help us with our mental health, as spirituality is mostly ignored, and as Muslims, that is a big part of our mental health?
I mean, they work in tandem. I mean, there's nothing intrinsic in these therapies that are of themselves Western. I mean, it's documented that in Baghdad, in sort of 200-300 years Hijri, they had talking therapies. They had there are lots of books written on the sustenance of the soul. There were music therapies, there were laughter therapies and comedy and aromatherapy for people suffering from mental illness. So these tools are there, and we should access them and still have that sort of a belief driven from our conviction in Allah and the promise of his support. So I don't see them as being contradictory, or I think they're very synergistic, in fact, that if we're in that position, we can sort of take them both and work together with them. There's no contradiction, certainly. And I mean, the other thing is, Islam also provides for us mechanisms whereby we can do some of those things. So if you don't like yoga or meditation, then we've got our own way of doing that. You wake up and do tahajjud. You do that at night. You've got the peace of the night, and you have that conversation with Allah. You do the tadabbur. You do the deep contemplation. You're not locking yourself away as a hermit. You're still part of society, but it provides us that structure. We've got Ramadan coming up, and after Taraweeh, we've got the ability to have a different relationship, with our Islam, with our Allah, and to think more about these things. So we incorporate those aspects, those therapies, into our day-to-day life.
Thank you. There's an interesting question that, how can you help someone who is going through a mental health crisis? And this can be bridged with another question, that what if they don't want to accept that help? Then what can you do?
We have to support them. I mean, we love them, we care for them, they are our friends, they are our family. And like I said, there are those sort of three aspects of care. There's, if they're not taking personal responsibility, and it's sometimes difficult for people in that situation, especially if you're in a situation of low mood or despair, for you to recognize that people would actually care about you. And so we have a responsibility to stick with them, to still encourage them, to try and see it from their perspective, not to put pressure on them, but to slowly work with them to get them to engage either with other people or with the services that can sort of provide the support. And we don't leave people behind. Islam is a social way of life, and we need to bring people along with that journey. And again, it's just finding other people or other ways in which we can destigmatize it and make it easier for them to access the support.
Dr. Naveed, I just want to build on that question a little bit, because I think it's a great question. So let's say I have a friend who maybe recently has lost his job or something. He's going through some difficulty with the family life and so on. So apart from maybe offering him financial support, or maybe helping him with dinner or something like that, what can I do to try and support his mental health specifically?
As a friend, talking to them, getting them to open up, getting them to express their anxieties, their worries and their fears. And you can frame your response and support either in a sort of material sense, in a temporal sense, or you can have it in a temporal sense with a spiritual bent on it. And again, it's getting them to recognize that that those promises of Allah, that yes, things are tough now, but it's not always going to be tough. Allah doesn't burden you more than that which you can bear. With hardship will come ease. Look, be thankful for the blessings that Allah has already given you. It may not seem like that, but you just go through a lot of the blessings that we have. You compare our situation, you calibrate it with people who are less fortunate. So you get them to see things in a slightly different way, where they can then start to develop a bit more sabr in their situation and be thankful for the favors that Allah has bestowed upon us. And Allah has also made the promise that if we are thankful, genuinely express that gratitude to Allah, He will give us more. Right? And so it's just having that conversation and giving them the confidence in themselves and in Allah's support, because Allah's promised it. You know, we take one step towards Him, He will run towards us. May not seem like it at the time, but we just need to keep at it and just keep that conversation. And what Islam and the Quran forbids is despair and hopelessness, right? And as you mentioned right at the beginning, Zabnisa, that complaining, that what if. And the Prophet said that we should never say what if, because that opens the door to shaitan. And so it's having that positive attitude. And if we study the seerah of the Prophet, he always had a very positive outlook on every situation, and he's always looking for the positive, and he was always ascribing the positive to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then that frames a different relationship of how we live our life. And you just got to be there for them, and just keep having those conversations.
And I think just as a reminder to everyone watching, if you know someone that's going through difficulty, and you take steps and you help them to get out of that difficulty, out of the mental problems that they are having, there's huge reward in that for yourself as well. That's something that we absolutely shouldn't forget. And our community companions project that Sister Zebunessa was talking about ties in well with this concept of helping out people in times of need. So we've got maybe about 4 or 5 questions to go. The next question is, poor mental health is often cited as the cause of many suicides. What is the Islamic perspective on this?
How do you mean? I don't quite understand the question.
I think the question's asking, probably it might be about, from an Islamic perspective, the link, so how people get from mental health problems to a point of ending their own life. Islamically, what do we say from that Islamically?
It's a very tragic situation, and my heart will go out for people who are in that situation, or people who know people who've been in that situation. And obviously, it's easy to say from a Shari perspective, suicide is haram, and then the mode of your suicide, you get to repeat that for all eternity, and it's a complete denial of these principles that Allah's mentioned in the Quran, and you're denying Allah's help and His support and all those things. I get that. I was taken by if the audience want to, Mufti Menk did a really good sort of 6-minute piece on this. There's that very recent tragedy in India, Aisha, the young girl who was being bullied by her in-laws, who essentially filmed her own suicide, and that's been in the news lately. And when people are in that really desperate situation, it's quite likely that they have an excuse in as far as they're not mentally competent at that point in time. So we need to be empathetic to the situation. Yes, we can say suicide is haram, but people, when they are in that really desperate situation, they have lost touch with reality. And what we need to do, myself, yourself, Junaid, Zebnisa, all the people around us, is equip ourselves with the tools to recognize when people are in that really desperate situation. And so we can pull them back from the brink. We can support them. We can signpost them, even though we don't have the tools to prevent those things. We can signpost them to people who can provide that support. So it's a terribly sad situation, and suicide rates are having a firm religious belief is not protective against suicide rates. And I mentioned right at the beginning that there's a lot of research saying that having strong religious beliefs is protective against severe mental illness, and there's a lot of research around that. But it has no correlation with suicide rates. So there's something else that's going on with these people who are in that situation. But what we need to do is recognize when people are in that desperate situation and really be there for them, and signpost them for experts who can help them.
I think this question might be going towards that if a person has mental health issues, will they be accountable if they commit suicide?
Again, I mean, Allah is the most just. I know that for sure, and so I would not be in a position to pronounce judgment on them. That's not my job. I'm not going to do that. I know for sure that come the day of judgment, Allah will be the most just. So Allah knows the situation of these people, and I need to do what I can to prevent my loved ones from being in that situation.
That's a very loaded question, and we're going into the realms of fiqh and so on, away from the medical expertise of Dr. Naveed. I think we've gone over our time quite a bit, so we're just going to do one final question to wrap up. Sister, do you want to go ahead with the final question?
This is quite a popular question that most will associate having mental health issues with low iman. How do we overcome these ideas? So this, I think, ties in with cultural taboos as well. But,
yeah, I mean, gosh, I mean, I can talk for hours on this, but the social construct, the way society is made here in the West, where you have a pervasiveness of consumerism and individualism and the promotion of unrealistic and unreasonable expectations of perfection, this puts people in a really vulnerable position. And even people with really strong iman will be, over time, influenced by the pernicious nature of what's around in society. So I wouldn't, I would not myself make that correlation between weak iman and mental illness. I think they are separate issues, and I know people who have struggled with their mental illness who have a strong iman. What I would say, though, is that I mean, the connotation people will say is that if you've got what people are trying to sort of infer is, if you've got mental illness, you've got weak iman, you're a bad Muslim, and that in itself would lead to a downward spiral of even more poor self-esteem and more mental illness. And that's not what it's about. What it's about is recognizing that certainly in this society, with the pernicious nature of all the influences around us, we lack as a community the coping skills and the resilience, the emotional resilience, the mental health resilience to deal with the ups and downs of life. And to, the first step in that direction is recognizing the things that we've sort of mentioned. And I'll sum up again that mental health is real. and we need to recognize that. There are therapies available. We need to destigmatize mental health and illness. As a community, Muslims have always had a positive attitude towards people with mental illness, and we need to bring that back. The Quran references mental illness, and it tells us to be positive. It tells us that we shouldn't dwell on the sadness and sort of the sense of despair at all. And from our beliefs, we have a sense of recognizing the all-powerful nature of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the fact that he doesn't burden us more than we can bear, that with hardship there is ease, that if we have sabr and shukr, Allah will support us through things, through the concept of tawakkulullah, right? And we need to be content with where we are in the good times and in the bad times, and be grateful for the blessings that we have. And it might be good to recount the blessings on a daily basis that we have, those small wins. These things will help build up our resilience over time. And it's not in itself any direct correlation with your state of iman per se. It's just having a deeper, more fundamental relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we have that opportunity coming with Ramadan, literally a fortnight away, where we can prioritize this discussion amongst ourselves and with our families, and well, it's principally families because we're still in lockdown. We can start to generate that sense of trust and coping. So I hope that answers it, and so summarizes where we started from, actually.
That brings, it covers a lot more, I think, than just even that question. So thank you very much. That that was just an amazing interaction that we had. We learned ever so much. Just in conclusion, I said a lot of negative stuff in the beginning, so a few positive words about the future. The Department of Health set up the Delivering Race Equality Program of 2005 to 2010, which is an action plan of 12 goals for mental health commissioners and providers to tackle discrimination and deliver an approach that will be supportive to BAME communities. Time to Change is a campaign by Mind, which aims to prevent discrimination, reduce stigma, and encourage conversation about mental health, and is already working with faith institutions as we speak. So the rest of the effort lies with us, and we need to work to overcome the barriers that have blocked the recognition of mental health issues, buried or denied these problems only to affect future generations. We have to bring about this change within our families and communities and among those that are suffering. And it takes courage to do this. As for the person suffering to take help, it takes courage as well. But let's make this the norm, and let's make it easy. Thank you, Dr. Naveed, for the wealth of your knowledge.
Thank you for the invitation, and it's been a great privilege to go through these things. And I've benefited myself as well from revisiting these things. And we just need to remind ourselves that, why we're here, and the fact that we're here to support each other as well. So thank you for the opportunity, inshallah.
Thank you again from myself as well, Dr. Naveed. I think it was very well presented, and we can see through the wealth of questions that we had, a very a topic that people have a lot of interest in. So we definitely need to invite you for another session at some point, and we can go through more of this, and perhaps go through in a bit more detail some particular aspects of this topic, of which there are many. So inshallah, we'll look to organize something again in the future. And thank you again from both of us. And just for our viewers, thank you, Jazakallah khair, for viewing and joining us in this session this evening. If you'd like to give us any feedback on the session, please feel free to do so using any of the channels of communication that we talked about earlier in the show. You can also suggest other ideas for different workshops that you might want us to cover. We're open to different suggestions as well. And just to briefly cover on the work that we're doing with Faith Inspire and Hounslow Muslim Center. This halaqah is run every Friday at the same time, covering a range of topics. And on the screen there, you can see some of the other topics that we've been talking about. So, Ramadan is just around the corner, like Dr. Naveed said. So we're going to be delivering a session on Ramadan coming soon. So please join us for the coming Fridays as well. And inshallah, we can all benefit from that. So that concludes today's session. And we also had Sister Zebunessa's concluding comments. Jazakallah khair for that as well. So all that remains is for us to say Jazakallah khair once again and Assalamu alaikum from all of us.
Thank you again. Assalamu alaikum.
Well,